Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. Sitting in for Pinky Webb, I'm Mai Rodriguez. Today on the program, President Rodrigo Duterte addresses the United Nations General Assembly for the second time, speaking up on the arbitral award, war on drugs, and COVID-19 vaccine inequity. Also, a lawmaker welcomes the president's approval of the limited face-to-face classes, but calls on the government to ramp up efforts in keeping schools safe, including installing surveillance and contact tracing systems. And with few days left, senators push to extend the voters' registration. Senator Win Gatchalian joins us live. President Duterte again deplores the hoarding of COVID-19 vaccines, saying this puts poor countries at a disadvantage amid the pandemic. In his speech at the 76th United Nations General Assembly, Mr. Duterte calls for equal access to COVID-19 vaccines. Here's the president in his own words.
It is a man-made drought of vaccines ravaging the poor countries. Rich countries hoard life-saving vaccines while poor nations wait for trickles. This is shocking beyond belief and must be condemned for what it is, a selfish act that can neither be justified rationally or morally.
The president also highlights the value of the 2016 South China Sea Arbitral Award, saying no country can disregard the ruling, which is now part of international law.
The 1982 UNCLOS and the 2016 Arbitral Award of the South China Sea provide a clear path towards a just, fair, and win-win solution for all. The award must be seen for what it is, a benefit across the board to all who subscribe to the majesty of the law. No amount of willful disregard by any country, however big and powerful, can diminish the arbitral award's importance.
And Mr. Duterte also addresses his controversial war on drugs, saying all those who transgress the law will be held accountable. This is amid the probe of the International Criminal Court on the Duterte administration's war on drugs. In other news, the senator is calling on the government to intensify its efforts to make sure that schools will be safe for both learners and teachers during the rollout of limited face-to-face classes. Apart from the enforcement of health protocols, the senator is also highlighting the need for a strong surveillance and contact tracing system. What else can be done to make the pilot of face-to-face classes safe? Let's go straight to the source of the story. Senate Basic Education Committee Chairman Win Gatchalian joins us now. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Mai. Good morning to our listeners and televiewers.
Glad to have you with us, sir. Now, you've long advocated for this for quite some time now. But even as the president gave his go signal, marami pa ring apprehensions po, lalo na from the parents. Now, how do we make the schools safe for reopening? Kasi according po doon kay Dr. Tony Iliachon, I was speaking to him yesterday, there are 4 things that need to be addressed before we can reopen schools. First of all, ventilation of classrooms and making sure there is a safe environment for the students, and also teachers and employees need to be vaccinated and free testing for teachers and students. And finally, yung vaccination po for school children.
Well, Mai, first of all, let me thank the President and the IATF for heeding the call to open classes, at least on a pilot basis. This class opening does not mean that we will go back to normal ASAP. DepEd will launch a pilot testing program in which they will choose about 120 schools out of the 60,000 schools in the Philippines. So this is only a minuscule compared to the total number of schools, but it will give us some level of experience. No? I'm hoping that they can increase the number of schools to probably 1,200 or even more, especially start with the low risk and zero COVID area. So just to put it in a proper perspective, we're not opening school as it is, pre-pandemic time. This is only a handful of schools, 120 schools. We will pilot test, meaning we will see how we can open our schools safely in the future by opening up a small amount of schools. And what's important here are realistic measures. Of course, we want to test all our students, we want to test all our teachers, but we all know that that will demand a lot of resources. So the basics will be, number one, make sure that we have hand washing facilities and we have budget for that. We have close to about 200 million pesos for hand washing facilities for students. Number two, social distancing. So meaning they cannot go in schools 5 days a week, probably about 2 days, 3 days a week, so that the capacity will be divided into two or even less. And number three, make sure that our teachers have the health coverage so that they can tap this health coverage in case of infection. So meaning PhilHealth and DepEd will play a very big role in giving and protecting our teachers from COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very timely that you mentioned the health coverage kasi po yung Alliance of Concerned Teachers is appealing na sana po may ample support for the teachers in terms of free testing and also free treatment. Now, how can this be addressed before we do the pilot test?
Yes. All of our teachers have PhilHealth. No? All of our teachers, our principals, our superintendents have PhilHealth. That's an automatic benefit to them. But what DepEd should make sure, in tandem with PhilHealth, is this coverage is accessible to our teachers, principals, and superintendents. Meaning that if they get infected, they have the hospital coverage that they can tap into. If they want to be tested, the testing is free and they can use that right away. And the reimbursements are fast. What we want is to arm our teachers with confidence. It's important that our teachers are confident that they can go to school, they can teach physically, and once something happens to them, government is there to protect them. This is already built in, but what we are telling DepEd is to make sure that it's accessible and easily tapped into, because PhilHealth can be very bureaucratic, as you know, and we want our teachers to be prioritized because they are frontliners in the education system.
Mm-hmm. So, wala pang date as to when this will start and wala pang listahan ng participating schools. But as you mentioned, very minuscule, 100 public schools, 20 private schools. How soon should the DepEd release this list?
We have a list already because a few hearings ago, I think early part of this year, we've been lobbying. The Senate as a whole has filed a resolution to urge the DepEd to open school, to go back to physical face-to-face classes and to open schools this coming school year. And so last hearing, we flagged them to already come up with the number of schools, the criteria in which these schools will be chosen. It's important that is based on science and based on risk. So, for example, there are about 90 LGUs that have zero COVID. We can start from those LGUs because zero COVID at all. They don't have any active cases. And then those LGUs which are considered low risk, we can open a few schools there. So it should be based on science and risk. And this is where DepEd is now validating. Last March, they have the whole list already. But the situation is changing all the time. Before there were about 400 LGUs. Now there are only 90 LGUs. So the situation is changing all the time. So it should be based on science and risk. And that is what DepEd is validating right now. But the pilot testing will happen. And it's just making sure that the schools that will be chosen qualify because of the science-based and the risk-based criteria.
Mm-hmm. Kasi very important din yung approval ng LGUs doon sa kung sino ang mga schools na magpa-participate. Now let's look at the participants. Ang nakalagay po doon, kindergarten, grades 1 to 3, and tech voc students. Sila po ba dapat o do you prefer na puro higher grades for the pilot test?
Well, let me stress, I want to stress this, walang pilitan to, no? So if
voluntary,
if the parents feel that they don't want their kids to go to school or it's not the right time, then walang pilitan to. They will not be forced to bring their kids to school. They will continue with their modular learning. They will continue with their distance learning. So this is on a voluntary basis, and the LGU should certify. So on the ground, it's a partnership between the school and the LGU. And if the LGU says it's safe and we have the appropriate measures and the appropriate mechanism to respond, then they will open school. So it will pass through a very strict system of evaluation in terms of which schools will be chosen. So just to go back to your question, I do agree with those grade levels, provided that it's based on science and risk.
All right, but many doctors and experts are saying we're in the longest wave of COVID-19 infections, and we saw record-breaking numbers in the past weeks. Now, how would you respond to concerns that this could put students more at risk?
Well, that's why my caveat here is to start with the zero-risk LGU. So I mentioned earlier there are about 90 of them. Some of the LGUs I looked at never had COVID at all, no? Because they're in islands or in mountains. So start with those areas because it's zero risk. And then evaluate the low risk, because we have LGUs that they only have 1 case or 2 cases. So we can evaluate those LGUs. But definitely high-risk areas should not be allowed to go back to face-to-face classes. So it will be risk-based and science-based approach. That's why I've been advocating that the alert levels, we are on now here in NCR at least, we're following the new granular alert levels. That should be practiced also in opening of schools, because that approach is based on science and risk, and that can be applied in school opening. So for example, alert level 1, which is zero risk or low risk areas, then you can open schools. But if it's alert level 5, which is the highest, then you close schools. So that type of approach can be used in the opening of schools and the programming of going back to face-to-face classes.
Okay, finally, Senator, one final question before we can move on to other topics. What about the vaccination of students?
I've been advocating that, especially here in NCR. I've looked at the numbers. Like, for example, here in Valenzuela, we're already reaching 85% for first dose and close to 60% on second dose for our adult population. But I do recognize that some LGUs have not even started, or have not completed their senior citizens and the comorbidity population. So in the name of fairness, we can delay the vaccination of teenagers probably to December or even next year until all senior citizens and comorbidities are already completed nationwide.
Okay, many more topics to be covered in a bit. We'll be taking a short break. When we return, the Health Department confirms nearly 8,000 government-procured COVID-19 tests expired last year. Senator Win Gatchalian shares his thoughts. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Senator and Philippine Red Cross Chairman Richard Gordon is not backing down amid the unrelenting attacks from President Duterte. He again led the Senate's probe on alleged mismanagement of COVID-19 funds on Tuesday. Lawmakers pointed out more anomalies, including the expiration of testing kits and the questionable business of top supplier Pharmaly. Still with us here in the program, Senator Win Gatchalian. Now, Senator, aside from the overpriced COVID medical supplies, it was revealed that there's some 550 million pesos worth of COVID test kits that were expired, and these were bought by the procurement service of the DBM and DOH. That's close to 8,000 test kits, and that could have been used to conduct more than 370,000 tests. Such a waste.
Well, without going into the details, no, I am shocked actually to hear about those numbers. And one of probably the number one strategy in the fight against COVID is test, test, test. And we want the LGUs to test as many as possible. In fact, as frequent as possible. That's why LGUs, like here in Valenzuela, we have our own testing lab, and as much as possible that we can test, we test. But testing is costly, and that's why we are also strategizing on who to test and when to test. And I'm just shocked on the numbers that there are a lot of testing kits that went expired. We should have given that to the LGUs because we want the LGUs to test as quick as possible, and we want them to use testing as a way to detect and reduce COVID. So I'm absolutely disappointed with those numbers because LGUs are demanding for more testing kits. If those testing kits were given to LGUs, then LGUs will have the ability to detect and lower down the number of cases.
O nga po, at pang ilang hearing na rin ito in the handling of the pandemic funds. I believe this is the 8th Senate hearing. What is the sense that you're getting? How vast ba itong corruption that's been uncovered?
Without concluding ahead of the hearing, my own thoughts on this is how can a small company, a 600,000 capitalized company, get a contract of 8 billion? No? And on top of that, there's no office. No? For me, any basic requirement should be an office, and an office is a sign of legitimacy. But if there is no office, then obviously it's a fly-by-night company. At the same time, the capitalization is only 600,000. No, meaning if this company folds up, government has no recourse in terms of going after this company. So, but my bottom line is this company is not qualified to supply this amount of supplies to government, and somebody in government should be answerable to that. I've been a mayor for a long time, for 9 years, and this type of procurement should be handled with utmost diligence because, number one, you're handling the people's money, and then number two, these companies can fold up easily and will be left holding the bag, especially in this time of pandemic wherein credibility and immediate service is very important.
Mm-hmm. Now, President Duterte has been lashing out at the Red Cross, at Senator Gordon, and he isn't happy with the Senate inquiry. What do you make of his tirades? Because there are some people who are saying he's trying to divert the public's attention.
Well, I don't want to comment on the relationship of the President and Chairman Gordon. And just to give full disclosure, I'm a Board of Trustee or Board of Governor. I'm a member of the Board of Governors of Red Cross. I've been a member of that since I was a mayor. And we have to remember, during the surge of the pandemic last March, and I've seen this with my own eyes, the whole nation was scrambling for testing capacity. We didn't have any testing capacity. Our ITM was the only institution that can do PCR tests. Red Cross responded very quickly. In fact, in the matter of 3 months, Red Cross managed to put a testing laboratory for the country. And that capacity equates to about 70% of the total testing capacity of the Philippines. Just imagine, in 3 months, the entire nation's testing capacity, almost 70% of the entire nation's testing capacity is in Red Cross. And Red Cross set it up because of the need. Without that testing capacity, we will not have any way of detecting and looking for that virus. So in due fairness to the organization was a big factor in terms of fighting COVID. And it responded very quickly when we needed the testing capacity during last year's surge. So
At na-acknowledge.
we need to give credit to Red Cross.
Na-acknowledge din naman po yan ni Secretary Duque. One quick question before we move on. There are proposals to abolish the PSDBM. Do you agree po?
I agree abolishing it, and I agree to abolish PITC. This has become a parting organization of many government offices. That's not the intention of PSDBM and the PITC, but it became a parting organization. Now, one of the most glaring examples was PITC was given money to build fire stations by the BFP. PITC is it's Philippine Trading Corporation. So what does it have anything to do with building fire stations? So in other words, it became a parking organization, and that's not the intention. So because it veered away from the intention, might as well abolish it.
All right, Senator Win Gatchalian will still be with us after the break. Still ahead, we'll talk about the senator's appeal to extend the voter registration period. The Source will be right back. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today, Senator Win Gatchalian. Still a number of issues to cover. First, let's go to the government's vaccination program. Senator, very quickly lang po, kasi we have very little time left. So far, 18 million Filipinos have been fully vaccinated. This is still quite far from the target of 70 million people, or at least 70% of the population. What are your thoughts on how this is going so far? Parang malayo-layo pa yung herd immunity.
That's why we have to just live with the virus, Mike. No, of course, the best case is to get the vaccines as quick as possible. But we all know that the whole world is scrambling to get their vaccines. So right now, we just have to make do what we have. No, it's not a matter of money or funds. It's a matter of supply, and we don't have the supply that we need to vaccinate 70% of our population. So we just have to live with the virus right now. Make sure that we follow the health protocols, wearing masks and shield and social distance. On
the booster shots, Senator, should the government prioritize giving booster shots to health workers? Because most of them received Sinovac during the March rollout, and studies have shown efficacy wanes over 6 to 8 months.
I'm in favor of giving our health workers booster shots as long as it's science and medical based. No? Because a lot of this stuff is really based on what people read over the internet. No, some of them, they just read some article over the internet. Even the booster shots are not accredited or are not mandated by the WHO yet. So we have to make sure that it's based on science, and we have to make sure that research is conducted first before we give booster shots to our medical frontliners. But I do agree. No, because they're always exposed, and I see them in the field being exposed every day.
Pero sa budget po ba next year, may funds na nakalaan for booster shots?
Yes, there are funds for vaccines. It's not divided into booster or into to do regular population, but definitely there are funds allocated for vaccines.
Finally, Senator, mainit na topic. 23 senators filed a bill extending voter registration for another month. And COMELEC is set to discuss the matter at an on-bank meeting today. What else can senators do if the COMELEC still decides not to extend?
Well, they have to be very clear on why, because we don't see the reason why it should not be extended. The pandemic, we had 2 lockdowns this year, close to about 4 months of the year that we were not allowed to go out. And that crippled the registration, because you cannot force people to go out if they're afraid to get infected. So in other words, this is the sentiment not only of the Senate, but also of the House, because this is a concurrent resolution. So the representatives of the people are saying that please extend because a lot of our constituents have not yet registered. And COMELEC will be answerable to both houses if this heed or this call will not be listened to.
All right, thank you for joining us this morning. Maraming salamat po, Senator Win Gatchalian.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Mai Rodriguez, sitting in for Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.